There's a reason why Pasag Shack on Kodiak Island, Alaska is my absolute favorite place to be during the summertime. And in this video, we'll be testing out the brand new Canon R5 Mark II and see if it can handle puffins in flight. What's up guys, my name is KrisLuckPhoto, and in this video we'll be discussing how this new Canon R5 Mark II alongside the 100 to 500 handled puffins in flight. Now if you guys have never photographed puffins, they are extremely small and they're extremely fast. So that alone is going to make them pretty difficult to photograph in flight. The second issue is I'm also shooting down at them for a lot of these shots. So the camera did decide to sometimes focus on some rocks that were down below because they're about the size of an animal when you look through a lens. Like the camera's not going to know if it's a rock or an animal. And it chose not to see the puffins in some situations. We'll get into how it focused on some of that. Overall, I still believe the Canon R5 Mark II did an absolute perfect job, but let's just go over some photos here and we'll start from the beginning. This is what I was using. I was also pairing the 100 to 500 here with the 2x converter because when I first got here, the puffins were pretty far out and 500 millimeters just wasn't enough. So I did 1000 millimeters and is like F14 or something crazy like that. If we look here, yep, F14 or 1000 millimeters. So it's a little bit crazy when you think about it. If we scroll down, you can see the birds looked like you can see them technically, and the camera was focusing on them somewhat, but again, we're using a 2x converter, and when it's animals so far away, whether you're using a good lens or not, if it's going to be that far away, photos aren't typically going to come out that great. It's more of ID shots. You could see here, this is when the camera decided to not find them as I scroll through, and then it gets the autofocus back. So it's doing okay. Like I was not like blown out of the water with it right now, but I thought it was holding its own. And honestly, about like 85 to 90% of the shots were in focus, and some of them just weren't, whether it was at the end of the tracking or before it tracked. But when it was tracking, it did track really well. Unfortunately, I do like to use this Atomos Ninja to record my screen, so that way you can see what it actually looks like live tracking these animals. But I need to bring the camera to my eye when I'm using birds in flights, because using the screen or a monitor, getting birds in flight is nearly impossible. It's so much easier and more natural to track with the eye. So unfortunately, you can't use the external recorder to record the viewfinder and use the viewfinder at the same time. Eventually, we're like, okay, not too bad. This was like one of the first shots where I was like, okay, it held its own. Like you can see I'm going over some branches and stuff, and I mean, that animal is sharp, whether it looks like it or not to you guys. Like that is as sharp as it could possibly get with this setup, with the lighting. Okay, you can see here they got a little bit closer. I even zoomed out a little bit. We're still using the teleconverter, and 12,800 ISO is not very appealing. Again, I'm still just shooting, hoping to maybe capture something unique, not expecting what was going to come later. I really wanted shots like these where you can look down and see some rocks and stuff. So I was starting to get what I wanted. It was starting to get a little more active, and I'm once again, I'm getting pretty happy with this so far. I'm still shooting in full frame mode on the camera, and as we get further and further, we can see this camera's tracking really well in photo mode, and it's sharp, it's on focus, but again, 12,800 ISO is kind of impossible. And if you're wondering why I'm shooting at 3200th of a second, well, with puffins in flight, that's the minimum shutter speed that I found that works pretty much every time. Even 1/2500th of a shutter speed had blurry photos in it. So for puffins, I always do 1/3200th of a shutter speed. And that's going to make your ISO go through the roof unless it's a bright sunny day regardless. And you know, as we keep scrolling through, I'm starting to get some cooler shots, some cooler moments, and they're kind of off again. And they just kept doing this thing where they'd circle around, not doing much. Like this one was pretty cool. 10,000 ISO, f11, 726 millimeters. So I zoomed out a little bit for it. Like, I'm like, okay, things are getting a little better. I eventually took the 2x converter off. I didn't like any of the 2x photos. And then this here is where I started to get a little bit frustrated with the Canon R5 Mark II, because if we look here, that would have been an awesome photo, but it decided to focus on this rock instead of these birds here. It had 3 birds to choose from, and it decided to focus on these smaller rocks in the back. And like, these would have been awesome photos. I was pretty disappointed. And then eventually it did snap on. So I was like, okay, there is hope for this camera. And I think I zoomed. Well, that's crazy. Why do I look so zoomed in there? Oh, I cropped in like crazy. That's okay. Apparently I looked at this photo before. It did struggle, but then it eventually, you know, got its act together once it figured out what I was wanting to do. And then out of nowhere decided to focus on the rocks again. So that's, you know, some of the issues that you have with this. I mean, look, even down in the water, there's so many things that you can potentially run into where the camera's just gonna think it's not a bird. But it detected that the bird was moving and it stayed focused here. And I was really happy with that. This is like a new beginning of a focusing. Didn't want to focus, once again, going on the rocks. And then it grabbed. So if you're expecting a miracle, I wouldn't expect it. I don't think there's any camera that would have picked this up at that range. And that's just the reality of Puffins. That's the reality of wildlife photography. And that's the reality of technology today, is not everything's going to be perfect. I was starting to get a chance to relive those photos that I wanted from earlier. And here we go. Look at this guy coming up. I took this shot and I was like, yes. It happened. Like, I was happy here. I was incredibly happy here in this moment. Like, that looks really cool. I think if we go into the develop module, it'll look a little bit sharper. Yeah, it does. Library, it's not going to look as good. Just so you guys know how Lightroom works, the develop module will give you the full resolution image. This is like a preview resolution, and that's why it doesn't look blurry. So that's another thing just to be worried about when it comes to actual image quality. It's going to look a lot better. So now I'm like, okay, these Puffins are finally doing what we want them to do. Like, the camera's working, everything's good. I was happy with that shot, like I said. And at some point I said, all right, I'm going to go try to find another spot to look down on the cliff. And yeah, things just got, look at this. I mean, again, we'll go to the develop module. I mean, things are just getting nice. We've got Puffins and rocks, and we're shooting right below them. We moved angles, and eventually we find some good photos here. This ended up being absolutely stunning. Like, look at this whole scene here and everything. Like, everything was just working nice. Look at that tracking on the autofocus. It worked really good here. And like, these are cool shots. I didn't edit any of them. I didn't think they were cool enough until we got to these like really beautiful shots like here. So here's one of my first edits that I was really happy with. Puffins nice and close. Shot at 7.1 at 500 millimeters, but actually 6.3, not even at full 500 millimeters yet. But what I liked was the compression in the background. And the eyes, beautiful. Everything here is just really beautiful. And that's my first shot that I really like. I really like this next shot because we have a horned puffin, a tufted puffin, and this rocky beach down at the bottom, and then some beautiful green rocks. It really gives you that idea of where I'm standing for these photos. And yeah, I'm really happy with this whole photo in particular. This is the bird that it focused on. This bird's technically out of focus a little bit, but I don't think it's enough to care about. And I wasn't expecting to get multiple puffins, especially different kinds, in the same photo like that, but we did. This, actually, I'm going to rate this one. That's really nice. That's really nice. The kind of crop I would do here. Like that. That's a nice looking photo. Okay, continuing on. All of these were really nice. Wow. Look at this. This is the one photo I chose. Man, that's nice. That is a cool background. Here's one of those issues where the camera ended up not really trying to figure out what I was focusing on. Didn't focus on many here, and it completely missed this entire sequence. Next sequence started out pretty good though. I mean, there it is. That's one of my final photos. I mean, that is unreal. I got some cool videos of this as well. When this guy would jump off the cliff, it would look really, really cool. And these ended up all being in focus. I mean, that's a hard sequence to keep in focus. That happens so fast, guys. This is happening in under a half a second in real time. Like, starting here and jumping is happening so fast. And then out of focus, out of focus. We're in focus. I kind of like this one, but no, that's out of focus. This video goes to show how patience can pay off when you're photographing any wildlife. Just because an animal is doing one thing or not doing anything doesn't mean they're not about to. So always give things patience if you have time. Don't have to rush to the next subject. I kind of like this. I'm going to keep scrolling here. This photo ended up being one of the only photos that I kept that wasn't a puffin in flight. But man, oh man, it's the same photo that I have here on this monitor. It was really nice. And at first I didn't think it was that great, but then the more I looked at it, the more I was like, wow, that is just beautiful contrast and beautiful bokeh blur in the background on the ocean. All right, well, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and possibly learned something about this, and it wasn't just me trying to show, oh, look at these puffin photos I got. Like, I wanted to show you guys the reality of, one, just wildlife photography, two, puffin photography, because these guys are incredibly fast. When you play real speed videos and realize how fast puffins actually are, and then you look at this camera and see what the heck this thing was able to do at that speed in that fast split second of an action and focusing at all, keeping them tracked, it's a pretty dang incredible. Like I said, maybe like 85 to 90% of the shots were pretty good in focus anyway. A couple of them it did struggle, but you guys saw how the background was constantly changing. The puffins are flying fast. The lighting was decent this day. It was like not super bright. It was kind of cloudy, and then some lighting kind of peeked through. So I'm really impressed that I was able to do that. The only time I find it harder to photograph a puffin is when you're on a moving boat and you're going like up and down and trying to get the dang things to stay in focus. But yeah, you know, 130, 200 shutter speed is what I shot everything at. That's where I feel comfortable shooting puffins. Maybe some of you guys might say, well, I only shoot them at 1/5000th, or someone saying, I've shot them at 1/2000th and they were fine. That's cool, and I'm glad it works for you. I found what works for me. And you could see that the photos that were in flight were sharp and that were focused on, and that's all that matters to me. You guys can worry about your own settings. At the end of the day, it's my work, because I know there's always someone in the comments that wants to be an expert on editing or photography and whatnot, and it's like, I'm not saying I'm not open to learn something, but when I'm getting the photo and I'm getting everything right, then that's all that matters to me. And I just want to give you guys one quick peek on my photography autofocus settings on the R5 for the puffins in particular. And we have the subject to detect. This is on the purple autofocus menu. Subject to detect is obviously animals, but on the next tab, we're going to change the case to manual, and we're going to change the tracking sensitivity to -2 and the XL decel tracking to +2, and I found that ended up working the best for birds in flight, especially these puffins. If you can capture puffins, you probably capture nearly almost anything else in flight. So you know, I hope those camera settings might help you. Hopefully you have the R5 II, and if you're thinking about getting the R5 II, I hope this video inspires you to at least highly consider it, because I think it worked really well. I'd say it's a little bit better than the Canon R5. It's not 10 times better. It's not 2 times better maybe, but it's a little bit better. I definitely think it struggled with small birds on the Canon R5. That was my issue anyway. And I know a couple other photographers in town that had the same issue. So if you guys learned something, maybe give the video a like or subscribe to the channel. And with that, that's all I have. If you want to know my full photography settings, click this video right up here. It's got my entire settings for the Canon R5, so you guys can copy everything I have, and it works really seamless. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.